Open up to 1 Timothy chapter 1. We are here in our study of the household of God, which the Bible calls the church. There's all those who are saved by Jesus' blood are called and commanded to undertake such a lifestyle that necessitates you being in a church of God, meaningfully known, meaningfully discipled, meaningfully interacting and serving and being served by others as the Spirit so uses us. This is the household of God. And Paul wrote to Timothy, who was in Ephesus. Ephesus was one of the largest cities in the Eastern Roman Empire. It was one of the most influential city in the East. It is still today a famous place where people go on holidays or tourism to look at some of the ancient wonders of the world. And in the New Testament church, it was one of the main and most influential establishments. It was enormous. Paul had planted it through his preaching, and people had come to faith in Jesus, then were sent out as church planters, and other pastors had come up, and elders had been trained, and Paul sent Timothy there and wrote 2 letters to him, and then John writes 3 letters to that church, and Jesus even writes a letter to that church. It's a very important and influential church in a very important city in the New Testament. And Paul has sent Timothy there to put it back in order and to get it doing the right thing again, because it had strayed and drifted from the culture and the mission and the work that Paul had originally planted it to fulfill. Paul had originally planted it as a church planting, gospel preaching, soul winning, local church oriented church. That's a great church under Paul's leadership. But as he went away, he prophesied, false teachers will come. And by the time he writes 1 Timothy, that has happened. People have come in, as well as elders from within them have become twisted and have been obsessed with making people follow them and teaching, we learned last week in 1 Timothy, specifically teaching such strange peculiarities about the Old Testament law that really they were just obsessing over myths and genealogies and allegorical interpretations and who's a descendant of who and which angels influence which family line. It all became so amazing and interesting. And so the Ephesian church went from a mission sending, mission accomplishing, pastor training, church planting, gospel preaching church to a law preaching church, to a this is such interesting theology and it doesn't make me do anything church. The kind of church that people flock to because they're students of theology. They are Calvinists for 5 minutes and they know the most that anybody has ever known in the world. And they come to this church and they read their footnotes, which are longer than Scripture, and they speculate about what this might mean and how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, but their city is remaining unreached. And their people are twisting. And it's not just that. It's not idle people who speculate about weird theology. It never stays there. It always turns into legalism, as with a lack of mission and direction and God's command for the church, people make up their own things. What's this church about? I tell you what, it's all those young women who don't wear scarves the way I do or don't dress this way. I tell you what the real problem is. We have drums in this church. That's the problem. The demons are coming in, right? The people start getting without a command, without direction, not marching. They just start making up their own things and trudging through the mud, and God's church is ineffectual. They become legalists like we see in 1 Timothy 4. You can't marry. You can't eat this meat. This is unholy. This is what you can touch. This is what you can't touch. So Timothy is there to set things in order and to throw out these false teachers that they're not rejecting the gospel. They're just sidelining the gospel for the sake of preaching the law. Paul says, get rid of those men. They are wolves. Treat them like dogs. Get them out of the household.